guys. Welcome to another episode of Losing It with Don. I don't know if you've watched my weekly wrap up, but I mentioned in there I was going to kind of go over my glucose levels for the week, and it was really interesting. I went back this morning and I put together a trend analysis that shows what my carbs were, my percentage of my total calories that were carbohydrates from my macros breakout, and what my glucose was the next morning. So when I do this, what my body has stored in it in the form of carbohydrates overnight is going to turn into sugars in my blood. And that's why I've said before that as a diabetic, macros are more important to me than if I was just a regular person doing this. I wouldn't care so much. I would really just be looking for a calorie deficit to lose weight, and I would not be worrying so much about what my carb percentage of my total calories is. But we started this last week on Saturday on the 1st. My total percentage of the diet that was carbohydrates was 50% carbs. The next morning, my blood glucose readings were 109. Now, I would be happy with 109 just about any time. I'm diabetic. If I see it's under 140, I'm pretty happy with that. I do like my morning, especially when I'm dieting and exercising, I like it to be under 100, which when you'll see the rest of the week there, I was pretty good with that. So that day was my second highest day for percentage of carbohydrates in my body resting overnight. On the next night, my total carb percentage was 42%. The next morning, my blood glucose levels were 83. That night, 45% carbohydrates in my diet. The next day, my blood glucose was 98. That night, I managed to keep my carbohydrates to a low of 34% of my total diet. My blood glucose the next morning was 85. And this is about the time that I had a couple folks talking about, why are you so concerned with your carbohydrates? So I did track one more day, 42% of my carbohydrates, my blood glucose the next day, 86. But I decided I'm not going to focus so much on carbs. I'm going to eat what I want. I'm still going to eat vegan, and I'm going to try to keep it healthy, but I'm not going to pay attention to what my carbohydrates are. I had some snacks that I probably wouldn't have if I was monitoring my macros. That night, my overall carbohydrate percentage of my total calories was 63%, by far the highest that it had been. The next morning, blood glucose 108. The only day since I had really started getting my body pure and purged of a lot of the stored up carbohydrates and sugars that were excess from where I had been eating just junk. First day it was over 108. The next day, just to make sure it wasn't a fluke, I paid close attention to my carbohydrates. Percentage of carbohydrates of my diet, 39%. That was last night. This morning, blood glucose, 86. And guys, I really think going back to that first day when I had 50% carbohydrates and I had a 109 on the first morning after starting this diet, it was still just a bunch of extra junk that was in my diet from the days before, just having to get rid of that. So I tell you, if you're a diabetic and you're not tracking your macros, even if you're not eating vegan, guys, talk to your doctor, talk to a nutritionist, get your glucose monitor out, start a food diary, pay attention to what your macros are versus what your blood glucose levels are the next day. Now, none of the numbers that I've said with this would bother me as a diabetic. I think all these numbers are great, but still, even being careful with what I'm eating and trying to not eat any processed or refined sugars, any processed refined foods, you'll see that my blood glucose has been very much impacted by what I put into my body the day before. So that's it. I hope this gives you something to think about, and I hope it makes you start paying better attention and start taking a food diary. If you're diabetic, even if you're not, it's important. But if you're diabetic, guys, and you find that you just can't get your blood sugars under control, this is probably why. Start paying attention, because you can't just look at a package and see it's got 0 sugars, but it's got 20 carbs and it's got all this dietary fiber. It's still, when you go to rest at the end of the night, those excess carbs in your body are going to turn into sugars and impact your blood glucose reading. So that's it. Hopefully you learned something. Hope to see you the next time.